Hello and welcome to another episode of Lockdown Dads. I'm James Miller, author of Dads Don't Babysit and editor of workingdads.co.uk and father of two children.
Hi, my name's Ian Dinwiddie. I'm the founder of Inspiring Dads, and I've got two children as well. My two are 10-year-old, a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old. And this week, we're really delighted to be joined by someone who I've spoken to in the past. I've been huge pleasure to recommend clients to her as well, because I hold her in that much high regard. And Mary Williams, who is the Mind Architect. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you with us today. So, Mary, the first question we always ask people when we come on the show is, how are you?
I'm good. I'm actually really good. I had COVID actually about 7-8 weeks ago. Luckily very mild. And so for me, it was quite nice. It was 14 days in my bedroom with the children having to cook for me. But apart from a bit of brain fog, I'm very good. Thanks.
Excellent. So, James, how about you this week? Usually you get to ask me the questions up front, but we're a little bit of role reversal on the introductions this week. So, James, how are you getting on this week?
All right. Until very well. Let's do the most of the week and then like the last 10 minutes. It's been a funny week. I think a lot of dads will recognise what I felt this week, which is kids are back at school. Gonna have loads of time to get on with stuff, and now it's Friday. And what happened? Where did what have I been doing? How did that happen? It's the classic, stuff expands to fill the time available. But having said that, if I sort of stop and think about it, I realise that I have had a bit more brain space. I think stuff's been percolating through my brain a bit more. We've been carrying a series on working dads about working dads in lockdown. I'm sort of beginning to see the themes and I've read them all and sort of they're beginning to come together in my mind and see what the themes are and think about how we take that forward and all that sort of stuff. And there just wasn't the mind space for that while the kids were at home and everything was going on. Yeah. And so there's sort of the back of my mind is whirring away a bit more than it was before the kids went back. But then of course in the last 10 minutes as we record this, we've discovered that the R is going up.
My phone beeped.
Yeah, all the conversations I've been having with people this week is a lot of people saying, "Oh, here we go again. We're going back into lockdown." And I think, obviously last week we were talking about a second lockdown. I just wonder how, ask me again next week, and I just wonder where we'll be mentally and where we'll all be, and where particularly working dads will be given our experience of lockdown and homeschooling. But hey, for now. I'd say generally positive. So let's deal with the future as and when it arises. How are you, Ian?
Yeah, I think similar. I was very chipper last week, wasn't I? With the kids being back to school, I'd had 3 days, and I was jumping around, and then straight away, then news starts to come out in terms of rates of infection and all the rest of it. So let's put a little bit of a dampener on it, I guess. But this week I've been preparing for something called Flexpo, which is running next week. Actually running this week. By the time this comes out, it'll be tomorrow. So Flexpo is a virtual conference around flexible and remote working. Largely for HR leaders, and so I am doing I'm speaking, and I've also got a stand so people can come and visit me, and we'll put the link in the comments below. But yeah, really excited to be involved in that bigger, broader conversations about sort of working life in the future. But yeah, generally it's okay. You look at the numbers in the news, and you remember actually going back to March, April, where just put the phone away, don't look at the news. It's just not really worth it. You want to regulate that a little bit, I think. So yeah, so that's where it's been. So Mary, for the listeners and people who are watching this show, you've got a really interesting background, I think, in terms of the breadth of experience you have as a coach, as a mediator, and also as a therapist. And I wonder what sort of concerns did clients come to you with, or what sort of pressures were there in the last sort of 6 months that maybe haven't been there before?
I think there was definitely a kind of different dynamic actually in the clients that came. And I think what really happened was, it's almost like, I don't know if you've ever picked blackberries with your kids and then you dump them in the bowl and all the stuff floats up to the surface. And it was very much like that I think pushing everybody into lockdown, what it did was it just absolutely enhanced all people's stuff, and it just all floated up. So I think things that people have been able to kind of, you know, have in the back corner and keep denying, just they were straight up. And so it was things like, actually, you know, my relationship isn't really working very well, or actually, you know, I really do struggle to be around my kids, you know, 24/7, especially when I'm trying to work. And lots around, I mean, almost a key theme was around worrying what other people think of me. That was absolutely key, especially on work, you know, with people doing Zoom calls and Skype and Teams. It was really interesting. And a really brilliant one I had from one client was, she said, I've got massive imposter syndrome because I'm now seeing what everyone else's house looks like.
Yeah.
And she, you know, and she was saying, I'm looking at the MD's house thinking, oh, okay, you know, it's really nice. And so it was quite fascinating looking at, I had to go through lots with clients around what is your success? What is success just for you? How do you determine that? And lots of clearing people's clutter and relationships. And actually very early on, I said, what we'll see next year, you know, a year from now, we'll see divorces and babies, and it will have gone one way or the other. And actually, statistically, I think that's exactly what's happening.
That's really interesting. So this idea of, you know, what people will think of them. So what in normal life, you know, obviously that's a very loaded term. In pre-COVID life, let's call it pre-COVID life, what people were, you know, going out to work, interacting with each other, and sort of able to project a version of themselves that they chose. And yet when the camera and people come into your home, albeit via Zoom, they had to sort of expose more of their true selves. Is that
I mean, I think there's been a lot, hasn't there, talked about kind of Zoom fatigue. And I think that actually, when you're kind of in an office of, you know, 30, 40, 60, however many people, it's much easier to hide. And actually when you're, you know, like we're one-to-one, you know, I'm looking directly at you, looking directly at me, you're seeing everything that's behind me, you know, we're instantly very judgmental, but we're kind of on show, aren't we? And I think it really highlights, you know, you're looking at me, what do you think of me, rather than kind of we're standing next to, you know, the kettle and I'm looking out of the window, and it's much more intense. And it literally, I did quite a few talks, and that talk just had hundreds of people come to it.
Yeah, I mean, if we were in an office, I would not have a rainbow above my head.
It's got a shape, isn't there?
The light coming through the window that's the shadow of the rainbow.
It's like a broken halo, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's like Hanson and his mirror. Mirror, for those of you who saw Hanson Lee's episode.
But yeah, that's a bit strange. And what about dads? Obviously, we're sort of slightly focused. I mean, we want to talk to all working parents to some extent, but clearly the focus is slightly on working dads. Did they present? Did you get more working dads to you, or specific issues that working dads brought to you through? Well,
lockdown? I think a lot of my clients, the majority are men anyway. So it just tends to be something that I attract. I quite like the kind of male energy, and I think because I just basically don't take any bullshit, that men like kind of coming to me as well. And what I saw actually was men really struggling with that transition to work at home. So I think a lot of women, if they've had kids, you know, they've had a period of time at home, they're used to it, and men are not. And I think a lot of men are used to, you know, I go to work, and although it's really hectic and it might be, you know, the pressure might be awful, it is that kind of, I'm at work for today. But I think for a lot of them, having that kind of, you know, there's kids out there screaming, or they're, you know, dogs barking and people knocking at the door, I think it really threw a lot of them in the beginning. And I remember actually talking to one of my clients, and he's a team leader with sort of 30 people underneath him. And we had this call, and he was in his bedroom, and there were like Easter eggs on the wardrobe behind him, you know, messy clothes on the bed. He'd got a hoodie on, you know, sitting there eating breakfast like this. And you know, completely unshaven, just looked a complete state. And actually at the end, I had to say to him, you're still a team leader. And actually you need to, you know, even just whack on a shirt on your pajamas. You know? Yeah, but it was that. And it was, people just lost all routine, and they lost all sense of themselves. And and I think two ways about it. One, I think it's been absolutely brilliant for families, because I think people have bonded and they have sorted their relationships out, and they have gone, actually, this is really lovely, and I'm going to change the way that I work. So that's the kind of outcome I'm seeing, is I don't want to do that long commute anymore. Yeah. I don't want to live that pressured life. I'm seeing that a lot in dads. And then the other thing it's done is say, yeah, this isn't actually working anymore. So isn't the setup I want anymore. So I think it's kind of gone black and white with the ways it's gone.
Mm. That commute issue, I think, is really interesting, and I don't know if you found this, Ian, with clients or people you've been speaking to. Is one of the things that's come up time and again on the Working Dads and Lockdown series is exactly that. I don't really like the commute, but what I also don't like is not having a commute, is having to make that switch from work to life without anything in between, without being able to sit in the car for half an hour and mentally switch, and that comes up time and again. I don't know, is that something you found in?
Yeah, I think that transition, that emotional transition between one place and the other, and what people are, what guys have been saying to me is that if originally they worked from home maybe 1 day a week, now they want to be 2 or 3. They don't want to go completely one way or the other, and you're seeing that. So I think slowly over time, you're seeing increase in sort of footfall in London. Certainly, Lisa's been going in. She's been in the last 3 weeks, midweek, and she's been driving in, taking a car parking space, been renting a car parking space kind of in the east end of London, and then walking in from there. And she said each week it's been busier when she's been walking and moving around, which does suggest that people are starting to get a little bit more confident of going back in. But I don't think anyone wants to do everything full time. That whole being at home all the time with the kids, especially with the kids involved and trying to juggle that, plus versus being in the office all the time. Mary, in terms of that intention, so you're saying you've got clients who don't want that. How are they backing up that intention with sort of tangible changes to their lives?
Well, I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because employers can no longer say, we can't possibly do this job from home. In many circumstances, they can't do that. And I actually think a lot of employers have seen productivity go up. So actually, they're now thinking, we could have a smaller office, and actually everybody does work from home, and actually sometimes not only is productivity up generally, but productivity kind of within happiness and actually that kind of work-life balance, although I hate that term, because as far as I'm concerned, we don't have kind of work and life, we're just people, but I think a lot of employers are really looking to do that. I mean, a lot of people that I've spoken to have said, yeah, my employers are saying we can work at home, like you said, 2-3 days a week if we want to. Some are offering all the time. And in fact, somebody I've interviewed for my podcast, he actually reduced all of his employees to 4-day week and kept their salary the same, because he just saw productivity, rocket up. But I think you're right. I think, most people, we do want human contact. And we do want to be out of our environment. And I certainly know for me, I work from home anyway, but just even the visits that I did do and the talks that I did do, certainly over that 6 months, you blur the line, don't you, between work and home. And certainly home, some of the nice spaces in my house that I kind of enjoyed working in kind of became a bit of I don't even want to go and sit there when I'm not working, because it just feels like a workspace now. So I think that variation is really good.
Yeah, I know. My wife feels very jealous that I can go out to a coffee shop and work if I haven't got calls or anything, whereas she's stuck pretty much in the same room every day when she's at home because of the nature of the work, and she can't really be having the conversations about law and complex things in Costa, whereas I can go and edit a podcast in Costa quite happily, and really enjoy that mix, and that's so that's the mix that I get. Jamie, you're frowning at me, James. Costa.
Costa's the worst of all coffee shops. Everyone knows that. What are you doing to go to Costa?
I go to
You've got to go your local independent, and then it's Cafe Nero, and then it's Starbucks. Costa. Okay. What are you doing going to Costa?
I'm with James on that.
I know. I'm feeling like such a philistine or a corporate. They've got good Wi-Fi. I do go to Cafe Nero before, and the problem I need to do a bit more research of independent places with good Wi-Fi, because ultimately that's what really makes or breaks. And I've got a loyalty card. I've got lots of points that I need to spend. Yeah, I should have a long, hard look at myself, I think, is the answer.
This is a separate podcast. We should branch out into a rating coffee shops for working in podcasts.
There's a new one locally, relatively local, in a little village just up the road from us, Keston, and that's a second in a chain of local places called Daisy Gray, I think it's called. And so Lisa flagged that up to me, and I'm going to have to check it out and check out his Wi-Fi. Because apparently his cake's brilliant, but no one's reviewed the Wi-Fi yet.
Well, make sure you take this with you. So you can go, yeah, give me my free coffee because I just plugged you in the
I'm an
podcast.
influencer.
I
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Oh, your cakes are brilliant. Can I have one for free? I know. Yeah, I mean, just to come back to not talking about coffee shops, but you know, we're talking about intention and dads and what the differences are going to be going forward. You know, without giving away all your expertise for free, obviously, Mary. How do you help dads to achieve what they want? You are the mind architect. I assume this means you have a mind palace like Sherlock Holmes or something. I don't know. So what does that, you know, what does a mind architect actually do to help your clients?
So the analogy that I use is that a lot of coaches and therapists will effectively come into your house and help you work out where to put your furniture and how to paint it and all the kind of pretty stuff. And that's absolutely great. But if your house is subsiding, you know, that's entirely useless. And so I think of myself as somebody who gets under the house and helps you either repair the foundations you have or put in more foundations or put in foundations that you don't have at all. And actually then you know how to put your furniture out and how to paint your house yourself. So for me, it's all about the foundation work, and I'm bringing out a book, and that the 5 principles of the book are all foundational, you know, making better decisions, looking at your belief systems, what's happened in your past. It's all that foundational stuff. And the key issues that I find with men are complete loss of identity. So I see a lot of men sort of almost lifting their head up in their kind of 40s, just going, where did the last 20 years go? And, you know, quite often stuck in a career maybe they're not really a fan of anymore, got kids that they're not really engaged with anymore because they've kind of risen throughout their jobs. You know, and possibly a relationship that's not going very well. And so the work that I do with people is it's all about your identity and who you are. So I'm a leadership specialist, but I specialize in let's get you right and you the way that you want to be. And actually then you'll lead well anyway. So that's the work I do. It's all about looking at your core. And so these things around who am I and how do I lead as a father, and how do I lead as a person, and how do I lead as a partner, let alone, you know, my team and in my organization. So that's my work and I love it. Absolutely love it.
What you would call purpose, Ian.
Purpose, yeah, exactly. I wrote something, didn't I? I don't think it's up on the. I don't think it got published yet, though. Somebody couldn't make the internet work.
This week it will be on workingdads.co.
Hey. Yes, I wrote something about purpose. But yeah, I mean those foundational elements I think are really it's so important because, like you say, Mary, then you're just building. It's you know it's the analogy of the house that's built on the sand versus the house that's built on rock. I think. As much as anything. In terms of your sort of range of skills, and certainly the therapist counselling, I think you wrote counselling experience as well, haven't you? How much of what you do is in the therapy and counselling field, and how much is it in the coaching, or does it change during an engagement with the client?
Yeah, it does. So I see clients for a minimum of 4 months, and it can absolutely range from me sort of teaching them almost mini mediation skills that they can use with their team to manage conflict, right down to very therapeutic deep work that we're doing around, who am I and what's my fear of failure or my imposter syndrome or worrying what other people think about me, and just actually who am I anymore, to the kind of how do I build, you know, communication skills. So what I think is just that all of these skills, they cover everything. So again, I'm a bit of a storyteller. So another analogy that I tell is, you know, if you imagine yourself as the pond, and you drop a stone in, whether that's self-worth or you've cleared something in your path, it's going to ripple into all of your areas. So for me, it's an absolute blend of very deeply therapeutic work mixed with kind of towards the end of the program, a more sort of coaching style based conversation with a kind of dollop of the mediation and this is how you manage conflict. And that's sort of what I loved about it really was recognizing that, because what I was seeing with some of my clients was that they'd seen business coaches or they'd seen a parent coach, and I used to be a parent coach, and that fixes that one element of your life, but it kind of creates this imbalance in all of the other elements. So actually, if you're really focused on your team, you've probably taken your eye off stuff at home. And I realized that I was talking to these kind of more senior executives, you know, and I had one of them was talking to me about, you know, his 15-year-old vomiting vodka all over the floor at a friend's house, you know, and that's his oldest child. You know, my oldest child is 30 this year. You know, so I've been through all of that stuff. So I was, you know, just talking about what's normal, what's not, and how to have the conversations. How do you have that conversation around that sort of thing? So, you know, yeah, it's brilliant to have had the blend. And I think it's only over the past few years that I realized I kind of had that blend, if that makes any sense. But for me, it has to be holistic across your whole life, or, you know, you get this imbalanced sense.
And how did you get to doing what you're doing now, as it were? Did you start out thinking, I am going to go and help men to, you know, have more purpose or whatever, you know, and help them to achieve? Or, you know, did you just start out thinking, I'm going to do this, and then I'll do this, and then it so happens that men have come to you because what you offer sort of fits with what men in particular need? Or what's the journey, if you like?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Originally, I wanted to be a teacher in my early 20s, but I was just much more interested in people. And then I did a whole range of jobs around having my children. So my youngest is they're 14 and 16 still, so I have kind of two sets. And then I got into my 30s and discovered coaching actually through doing a parenting course, and really loved that sort of experiential learning. And then I just sort of started to notice probably about 5 years ago that the majority of my clients were men. And I definitely do see women. But I think it sounds really odd to put it this way, but I really love men. And I feel that a lot of men have a really hard time. And absolutely, women in history have had a hard time. But there's a lot of men right now who don't treat women like that. And in fact, in some respects, men are all tarnished with the same brush. And again, I felt going through the kind of Me Too movement that, again, it was brilliant for so many people to find their voices. But I really felt that it did quite a lot of damage to the relationships that men and women were able to have. And I remember I was doing interviews on LinkedIn, which, you know, Ian, that's how we kind of got talking. And I went to meet one of the men that I'd interviewed. And as we walked in, I was just having a nice day and the sun was shining and, you know, kind of full of the joys of spring. And I walked in and said to him, "Oh my gosh, you're so much better looking than your picture." Immediately I said, "Oh, I shouldn't have said that. I'm really sorry." It's one of those. And then as I walked up to him, I just said to him, "I'm so sorry I said that," and just stroked him all the way down his arm. And he and I'm very tactile. And we were both laughing about it. But the sad thing was we were kind of chatting about it. And I said to him, in some respects, the sad thing is I can and you can't. You know, and actually, so I became very pro men. And actually last year, sort of building up to COVID, I was looking at building a conference just for men to actually come together and discuss what is it to be a man these days? How, are we allowed to be masculine? Are we allowed to be male? Like, how are we allowed to be? And I just think that's really sad. And so I guess I have a real passion about, yes, women absolutely need to equalize. And absolutely, I see so many men out there helping that agenda, but we need to make sure we're not doing that and pushing men down. Yeah. So that's it. It kind of naturally found me is probably the kind of simple answer to your question.
And when you say, you know, you discovered sort of 5 years ago, you noticed that a lot of your clients were men. Is that just because you think there was a fit there that became obvious to you, or was it that more men were looking for help and looking for guidance?
That's an interesting one.
There's an idea, millennial and Generation Z are more open to coaching and thinking about who they are and how they operate.
So I think I tend to work on referral a lot. As Ian said. And so I think within the kind of the systems and relationships of a lot of the men that I know, I think you're right that men are starting to talk to other men a lot more. I think they're also starting to recognize that suicide is, you know, the biggest killer of men, isn't it, under 35? And I think that employers are starting to become more aware of, actually, in a very mercenary way, we'll get more out of our men if we look after them. And I think what I've seen, and I would love to hear your kind of answer on this, is I think a lot of men are looking at the engagement they had as children from their own fathers and not wanting to replicate that. And so what they're actually doing is saying, I recognize I need to not be that person if I want to be a better father than my father was. So I think people are really reaching out. I think I'm quite a mix of, one of my male clients actually said I was challengingly empathetic. So he said, you're solution orientated, you know, you work fast, you're no bullshit. You know, you'll call me on my bullshit. And he said, but you're incredibly empathetic. And he felt that he'd either seen people, mainly women, who were very kind of soft and gentle, or he'd seen other men who were very, you know, direct and to the point. And that what was the nice mix was this kind of, I genuinely really care about you, and I'm totally sympathetic to where you are, but let's sort this shit out.
Challengingly empathetic. I'm having that. See, that was me writing that down. I was like, that's
mine.
I'm going to be wheeling that out a few times in the next few weeks in webinars.
Yeah, you definitely that bit around the father they don't remember they have. I wrote a piece about that because it's come up again and again with my coaching clients in reference to not necessarily in a particularly negative way. They're sort of men recognizing, you know, the strengths that their fathers had, but also recognizing that they weren't really around and present, and and using that as a template, and, you know, to say, actually, I want to do things differently.
Yeah.
You know, I struggle a little bit with it because my dad had the type of job where he was flexible, and he had a car phone in his car, and he worked, and he would turn up at sports events he was a chartered surveyor, so he was on the road, and yeah, he had this massive great big brick thing that was in the back of the car, so he could he had flexible working back in the 80s when that wasn't necessarily a thing. But yeah, lots of men do mention that in, as you know, when you start the coaching engagement. So yeah, absolutely agree with that.
And I think that, I mean, I have 5 children, and I've separated from both of their dads. So I have 3 children who are 25, 28 and 30. And then I have the 16 and 14-year-old. And, you know, dads are so important. And I think a lot of focus is given on mums, and yet dads bring a different energy. And I think that, you know, they do bring a different quality into a child's life. And so for me, I'm so much about both parents being present, and my children have always had lots and lots of contact with their dads. That's always been, I've never left the town that I live in because of that, because I would never remove them from being near their fathers. And I think that we need to appreciate that more. And I think employers are finally starting to say it's as important for dad to have time at home with their child right from the beginning as it is for mothers. And I think mothers welcome that change. You know, actually, if the dad's at home, well, we get to go out and do other things and become a person. And I think one of the problems I see in parents, I don't know if you two see this, is, you know, it's both parents losing their identity as a human being, not just as a parent. And actually, if you have both parents in, the child gets this beautiful mixture of dynamic and different skill sets and different thoughts and behaviors. And you also get to go off and do your own thing too.
And that's been a big thing in lockdown that I think we mentioned in series 1 is parents weren't getting, as well as not getting any time to yourself, you weren't getting any time as a couple, you know, to be, you know, not just mum and dads, but husband and wife, or husband and husband, or wife or whatever. But you weren't getting to be, you know, a couple. And again, you lose your identity in that sense as well. You need some time on your own, you need some time together. And then obviously you were getting tons and tons of family time, whether you wanted it or not. But yeah, I think that's a very important point. And interesting, you mentioned, you know, dad's been kept in the picture, as it were. And just to loop it back to what you said about divorces and babies this time next year. Yeah, after we recorded last week, I went down to the cafe to do some work, and the table next to me was mum explaining to her 2 children, we'll still be mummy and daddy, we just won't be living together anymore. And just went, wow, you know, that is very much clearly, well, not clearly, but I'm assuming a lockdown thing has kicked in there, that they, you know, there's been 6 months side up, and the relationship has broken down. And as you say, I suspect, unfortunately, there might be quite a bit of that. Well, yeah, I think unfortunately it might be for the best, obviously. If relationship to that stage, it is for the best, but you know, it's difficult for everyone, obviously. So that's I suspect we might have a bit of that to look forward to. We need to wrap up with some get help, as it's called. What we're calling it. No, it's called Get Help, Ian. It's not called tips. Get help.
Get help. Yeah, that's my tip. That's my tip. Get help.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm not joking.
Have you got some help? Not a tip. Have you got some help, Ian?
Well, I've got some thoughts. I think it's around engaging with your kids' hobbies and trying to do things with them as much as anything. So I'm looking forward to this weekend. I'm back on the hockey pitch as an adult umpire. So I've got a pre-season match. Yay! I've got a new radio as well. We've been sent a new set of radios. So it's like a biker thing. I look like it's like one of those curly air tubes. Anyway, so I look like a bouncer. So I'm doing that, but I'm also on Sunday. Then my daughter starts hockey, so I go and help out with hockey as well, which I can do. And also I ref my son's football, so he's got a pre-season football match, and so I am taking my life into my own hands by reffing under-8 football on Sunday. So I think for me, it's getting involved in your kids' hobbies so you can sort of talk about them and be there and be involved in them rather than necessarily just dropping them off and then looking at your phone and chatting to other parents, which I could easily do, but instead I do put my hand up and do the bit that I can do. So that would be my tip. That was my get help.
We'll speak to you from your hospital bed next week then, after those 8-year-olds have kicked the living daylight out. That wasn't an offside shot.
It's a parents you got to watch out for.
All of them. Mary, have you got a tip, help that you would offer to dads, but anybody that's watching, listening?
Yeah. So I think actually I'm going to sort of go the other way and say make sure you get time on your own. And I think, it does look like we're headed for another lockdown, and we've already been in one. And I think it's given people a lot of time to reflect. And what I would say is, you can be the best parent that you can be. And you can also be that by having some free time and doing something which you enjoy and you enjoy alone or with somebody else. And don't be ashamed to ask that, because I think a lot of the dads particularly that I see feel, I am at work all day and then I come home. How fair is it of me to ask for kind of time out again? And what I would say is you'll be a better partner and a parent if you do have that time out, if you need it. So that's my top tip.
I think that's a good one. It's good to ask yourself, how fair is it to do that? But also, you need to come up with the answer, which is, it is fair.
Yeah.
The reason it's not fair for me to disappear completely, but if you're asking yourself the question, is it fair? You're one step ahead of a lot of men in the first place, I'd suggest. But make sure you come up with the right answer to that. I've got a boring bit of get help this week. Well, it's not boring. It was from the Working Dads in Lockdown series we've been running. We had quite a good one this week from a guy who works for Lloyd's of London. We talked about his email signature, which sounds really boring, but actually it was quite clever. In that he puts in his email signature, these are the hours I'm available. I work flexibly. I'm not around on a Wednesday. So all his team know, all his clients know, and everyone just accepts it because everyone is much more understanding of flexible working in the current climate. But if you need to let people know when you're available and when you're not, and your email signature is a really easy way to do that. Maybe I'm a fool for not having thought of it myself, perhaps, but you can be quite precise in your email signature, and you can deal with a whole lot of potential issues down the road about your availability just by putting it all in there. I thought that was a good idea.
Nice. Managing expectations.
I've seen that a couple of times over lockdown. I found it incredibly useful. I think that's a great tip.
It's a simple one, like all the best ones. Okay, listen, we will wrap up there. I think we'll be back next week. Ian, do you want to do the outro?
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. This has been Lockdown Dads. Mary, thank you very much for being here with us. If anyone wants to find out more about what you do, then where should they go?
My website's probably the central place. So it's www.mary-williams.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn as well under Mary Williams, the Mind Architect.
Thanks, Mary, for joining us. Thanks for listening and watching, and come back next week. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.